It was past midnight when I heard my wife laughing on speakerphone in our kitchen, her voice carrying that particular brand of intimacy she used to reserve for me. I was in the garage, elbow deep in the guts of my old Triumph, when her words cut through the night air like a blade. "He's got no idea, babe. I'll see you at the client dinner. Don't wait up." Client dinners must be wild these days. They never did end with lipstick on my collar back when I was the one taking her out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name's Andy Jones. Friends used to call me Jonesy before I became the ghost haunting my own house. 42 years old, ex-special ops turned corporate security manager for Midwest Financial. I've seen enough of the world's ugliness to know when something's rotting right under my nose. Our neighborhood in Cedar Falls is the kind of place where everyone pretends their shit doesn't stink. Perfect lawns hiding perfect lies, twitching curtains behind every window, and enough gossip to fuel a small nuclear reactor. The Hendersons next door wave every morning like we're all starring in some suburban sitcom, while Mrs. Cranston from across the street watches our house like it's her personal reality show. Judy, my wife of 14 years, has been playing the role of devoted mother and successful PR consultant. 31, sharp as a razor, and ambitious enough to cut herself on her own dreams. She's built quite the reputation at Morrison & Associates, the city's premier public relations firm. "Image is everything," she always says. "Control the narrative, control the outcome." Funny how she's been controlling our narrative right into the ground. Our daughter Renee is 12, caught between childhood and whatever fresh hell adolescence has waiting for her. Smart kid, too smart sometimes. She sees things adults think they're hiding, processes them with that brutal honesty only children possess. Tonight, while Judy whispered sweet nothings to her mentor, Blake Harmon, I sat in our garage, surrounded by the tools of my former trade, not just the wrenches and socket sets, but the instincts that kept me alive in places where people eliminated for less than a sideways glance. Blake Harmon, 35 years old social media darling, and Judy's supposed career guidance counselor. He's got that polished look that screams expensive cologne and daddy's trust fund. The kind of guy who's never had dirt under his fingernails. The kind of guy who thinks charm can substitute for character. "Tomorrow night, then," Judy was saying. "I'll tell Andy I'm working late on the Pemberton account." The Pemberton account wrapped up 3 weeks ago. I wiped my hands on an old rag and made my way to the kitchen doorway. Judy was leaning against our granite countertop, the one she insisted we needed to keep up with the neighborhood standards. Phone pressed to her ear, wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. She saw me and didn't even flinch, just smiled that practiced PR smile and mouthed "work call" before turning away. "Listen, I should go," she said into the phone. "Early morning tomorrow. Kiss goodnight?" Kiss goodnight, to her mentor. After she hung up, Judy turned to me with that same professional smile. "Sorry, honey. Crisis management never sleeps." "Must be some crisis," I said, keeping my voice level, "requiring so much personal attention." "You know how it is. Blake's been invaluable helping me navigate the senior partnership track." Blake's been invaluable, all right. I'd been tracking their mentoring sessions for weeks now. Late dinners that stretched past midnight. Weekend strategy meetings at his downtown loft. Phone calls that made my wife giggle like a teenager. "How's the bike coming?" she asked, changing the subject with the smooth efficiency of someone who lies for a living. "Slowly. Some things take time to fix properly." "Well, don't stay up too late. Some of us have real jobs in the morning." Real jobs. Like corporate security isn't real. Like the skills that kept her safe and comfortable weren't real. Like the man who'd taken bullets for his country wasn't real enough for her anymore. She headed upstairs, her silk robe whispering against her legs. Once upon a time, that sound would have made me follow. Now, it just reminded me of snakes shedding their skin. I went back to the garage and opened a beer. The Triumph sat there, half assembled, waiting for me to put it back together. Unlike some things in my life, motorcycles were honest. When they were broken, they didn't pretend to run. When they needed fixing, they didn't blame you for not being good enough. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Check your security system backup. Tonight, 11:47 p.m. I stared at the screen. We'd installed a comprehensive security system 2 years ago. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. I'd set it up myself, including backup storage that even Judy didn't know about. Old habits from my military days. Always have redundancy, always have proof. I pulled up the security app on my phone and scrolled back to 11:47 p.m. The timestamp showed our front door camera angle. There was Blake Harmon, letting himself into my house with his own goddamn key, while I was in the garage and Judy was supposedly upstairs getting ready for bed. The camera caught him heading straight for the kitchen, where my wife was waiting in that silk robe. It caught them embracing like lovers who'd been apart for years instead of hours. It caught Blake's hands roaming places that used to be mine. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came at 11:52 p.m., when Renee appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, probably looking for a glass of water or a late-night snack. The camera caught Blake's face twisting with irritation, caught him pointing toward the stairs and saying something that made my 12-year-old daughter's face crumple with hurt. The camera caught my wife laughing. Actually laughing while some piece of shit treated my daughter like an inconvenience in her own home. I sat in that garage, staring at my phone screen, and felt something cold and familiar settle in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had in Kandahar when our convoy got hit by an IED. The same feeling I'd had in Syria when intel went bad and we were surrounded by hostiles. It was the feeling of a man who no longer cared. I finished my beer and started planning. Because if Judy and Blake wanted to see the old me, the one who solved problems with extreme prejudice, I was happy to oblige. After all, I'd always been better at playing the hero in the shadows. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything look deceptively clean. I was up at 5:30, same as always, making coffee and scanning the neighborhood through our kitchen window. Mrs. Cranston was already at her post, pretending to water plants while cataloging everyone's morning routines. Judy came downstairs at 7, dressed in her power suit armor, navy blue with just enough tailoring to remind everyone she could afford the best. She moved through our kitchen like she was performing for an audience, every gesture calculated for maximum effect. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, not looking at me while she poured coffee into her travel mug. The same mug I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, back when I still thought we were building something together. "Sleep well?" I asked. "Like a baby. You?" "Oh, you know. Kept thinking I heard noises. Probably just the house settling." She paused for just a fraction of a second, the kind of micro-expression they teach you to watch for in interrogation training. Guilt has its own body language, and Judy was speaking fluent shame whether she knew it or not. "Well, old houses do that," she said. "I've got back-to-back meetings today. Don't wait up if I'm late." "Another crisis?" "The Morrison account is heating up. Blake thinks we need to get ahead of some potential issues." Blake thinks. Everything was about what Blake thought these days. After she left, I sat at our kitchen table and really looked at the space we'd shared for over a decade. Family photos lined the windowsill, Renee's school pictures, vacation snapshots from better times, our wedding photo where we both looked young enough to believe in forever. When did I become invisible in my own life? My phone rang. Frank Kowalski, my old army buddy who now owned Southside Boxing Gym. Frank was the kind of friend who'd help you bury a body and never ask questions, but he was also smart enough to talk you out of needing to bury one in the first place. "Jonesy, you sound like shit," he said without preamble. "Good morning to you too, sunshine." "I'm serious. Sarah mentioned she saw Judy out with some pretty boy last week. You okay?" Sarah was Frank's wife, a nurse who missed nothing and forgot less. If she'd spotted Judy and Blake together, Half the city probably knew by now. Define okay. Christ, you want to talk about it? Not over the phone. But Frank? I might need some advice soon. The kind you used to give in Kandahar. There was a long pause. Frank understood the reference. In Kandahar, advice usually involved creative problem-solving and a flexible relationship with conventional morality. "Gym's open all day," he said. "Come by when you're ready." After we hung up, I spent the morning doing what I do best, gathering intelligence. I started with our financial records, looking for patterns. Judy's spending had increased by 30% over the past 4 months. Expensive dinners, hotel charges, shopping trips that didn't result in anything new appearing in our closet. She was living a double life, and I was financing it. Next, I checked our phone records. Judy's call log read like a love story. Hundreds of calls to Blake's number, often lasting hours. Text message counts that suggested they were in constant communication. But the real goldmine was our cloud backup system. Judy had never been particularly tech-savvy, and she'd never bothered to change the shared account passwords. Every photo she'd deleted from her phone, every message she'd tried to hide, it was all there, archived in digital amber. The photos were what you'd expect. Judy and Blake at restaurants I couldn't afford, looking at each other like teenagers in heat. Judy and Blake in hotel rooms, in compromising positions that made my stomach turn. Judy and Blake playing house in his downtown loft while I was at work, supporting the lifestyle that let her cheat on me in comfort. But the text messages were worse than the photos. They revealed the depth of her contempt for me, for our marriage, for the life we'd built together. "He's so clueless," she'd written. "Still thinks I'm the woman he married. If he knew who I really am, he'd run screaming." "What about Renee?" Blake had replied. "She'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Besides, Andy's better with her anyway. I was never cut out for the whole domestic goddess thing." "When are you going to tell him?" "Soon. I just need to make sure I get what I deserve in the divorce. 14 years of playing housewife has to count for something." What she deserved. Like I was some kind of consolation prize she'd outgrown. I was still reading when my phone rang. Renee's school. "Mr. Jones? This is Principal Martinez. I'm afraid there's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "Renee got into an altercation with another student. She's not hurt, but she's quite upset. Could you come in?" I was there in 15 minutes. Renee sat in the principal's office, her face streaked with tears and her knuckles scraped raw. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw something in her eyes that broke my heart. The look of a kid who'd been carrying adult problems for too long. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Tommy Peterson said Mom was a whore," she whispered. "He said everyone knows she's cheating on you. He said you were too stupid to see it." Tommy Peterson, 12 years old and already a product of his environment. His mother was one of Mrs. Cranston's Gossip Network lieutenants. "So you hit him?" "I broke his nose. That's my girl." Principal Martinez cleared his throat. "Mr. Jones, while we understand Renee was provoked, we can't tolerate violence. She's suspended for 3 days." "I understand. We'll deal with this at home." On the drive back, Renee stared out the window and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Dad, is it true? About Mom?" I could have lied, should have lied, protected her innocence a little longer. But she'd already lost too much, and she deserved honesty from at least one parent. "Yeah, sweetheart, it's true." She nodded like she'd been expecting it. "I know. I've seen him at the house. Blake. He's mean to me when Mom's not looking." "Mean how?" "He tells me to go to my room when he comes over. Says kids should be seen and not heard. Last week, he locked me out of the house when it was raining. I had to wait on the porch for an hour until Mom got home." The same incident I'd seen on the security footage. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Mom said it would just make you angry. She said you were already stressed about work and money, and I shouldn't add to your problems." So Judy had turned our daughter into a co-conspirator in her own betrayal, had trained her to protect the affair that was destroying our family. That night, after Renee was asleep, I sat in my home office and planned my next move. I'd spent years in places where the wrong decision meant disaster, where hesitation was a luxury you couldn't afford. This situation required the same kind of strategic thinking. Judy wanted to control the narrative? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important about narratives. They only work when you control all the information. And I was very good at gathering information. I started with Blake Harmon's background. Social media made it easy. The man documented his life like he was running for office. I learned his routines, his hangouts, his weaknesses. I learned about his ex-wife, who'd divorced him for infidelity. I learned about his business practices, which skirted the edge of ethics on their best day. Most importantly, I learned that Blake Harmon was a coward. All flash, no substance. The kind of man who'd fold under real pressure. By midnight, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't particularly noble. But it was thorough, and it was designed to give Judy and Blake exactly what they deserved. After all, they'd asked for this when they decided to play games with my family. Time to show them how the game really worked. Frank's gym occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the part of town where gentrification hadn't quite reached yet. The neighborhood still had character, which is a polite way of saying it had more pawn shops than coffee shops, and the kind of bars where people settled their differences with their fists. I found Frank in his office, a cramped space that smelled like leather and liniment. He looked up from a stack of invoices and took one look at my face. Jesus, Jonesy, you look like you're planning a war. Maybe I am. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Talk. I laid it all out. The affair, the contempt, Blake's treatment of Renee, Judy's plans for the divorce. Frank listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you need? Advice. The kind that doesn't end with me in handcuffs. Smart man. Prison orange would clash with your complexion. He leaned back in his chair. You want to hurt them where it counts? Don't go for the body. Go for what they value most. Which is? For her, reputation, image, the precious career she's been building. For him, same thing, plus his ego. These social media pretty boys are all the same. Take away their audience and they crumble. I'm listening. You've got evidence, right? Photos, messages, all that digital dirt? Enough to bury them both. Good, but don't dump it all at once. That's amateur hour. You want to bleed them slow, make them paranoid. Start small, make them think they're safe, then escalate. Frank's strategy made sense. A full frontal assault would just make them circle the wagons. But a campaign of psychological warfare? That would eat them alive from the inside. I left the gym with a plan and a renewed sense of purpose. The old Andy Jones, the one who'd been content to fix motorcycles and pretend his marriage wasn't dying, was officially retired. The man walking out of that gym was someone else entirely. Someone with nothing left to lose. My first target was Blake's precious car, a BMW convertible that he treated like a religious artifact. Every morning he posted photos of it on social media with captions about living the dream and success has a sound. That night, I paid the car a visit in the parking garage beneath his loft building. Nothing dramatic, just a few strategic cuts to the tires and a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Next time, it won't be the car. Simple, anonymous, effective. The next morning, Blake's social media was full of outraged posts about vandalism and jealous losers. He'd called the police, but what could they do? Random car vandalism happened every day in the city. But I knew it would eat at him. Guys like Blake lived in bubbles of privilege and entitlement. The first crack in that bubble was always the hardest to ignore. Phase 2 came 3 days later. I'd been monitoring Blake's email, amazing what you could learn about someone's digital security when you knew where to look. His password was Success 2023. Original thinking wasn't his strong suit. I found what I was looking for in his sent folder. Flirty messages to Judy, mixed in with business correspondence. Nothing explicit, but plenty of inappropriate material for someone who was supposed to be providing professional mentorship. I forwarded a selection of these emails to Blake's boss at Morrison & Associates, making it look like an accidental CC error. Just a simple mistake that could happen to anyone. The response was immediate. Blake got called into a meeting with HR about maintaining appropriate boundaries with colleagues' spouses. Nothing career-ending, but enough to put him on notice. More importantly, it made Judy paranoid. She started checking her own email obsessively, deleting messages and changing passwords. The stress was starting to show. She was snapping at Renee, drinking more wine with dinner, jumping every time her phone rang. "Everything okay at work?" I asked one evening, playing the concerned husband. "Fine," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Just some office politics. Nothing I can't handle." But her hands were shaking as she typed, and she'd started biting her nails, a nervous habit from her college days that she'd worked hard to break. The third phase was more personal. I'd been tracking their movements, learning their routines. Every Tuesday they met for lunch at Chez Laurent, an upscale bistro downtown where they thought they were invisible among the business crowd. I arrived early and requested a table with a clear view of their usual spot. When they sat down, I started taking photos with a telephoto lens. Nothing illegal, just documentation of their public behavior. But I made sure they saw me, made sure Blake noticed the camera, made sure Judy realized her husband was watching. The effect was electric. Blake kept looking over his shoulder, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. Judy couldn't sit still, kept checking her reflection in her compact mirror like she was expecting paparazzi. They left after 20 minutes, their romantic lunch ruined by the knowledge that they were being observed. That night, Judy confronted me. "Were you following me today?" "Following you where?" "Downtown, at lunch." "I had a meeting with a client near Chez Laurent. Why?" She studied my face, looking for tells. But I'd been trained by professionals who could lie to enemy interrogators. My wife's amateur psychology was no match for that. "It's nothing," she finally said. "I just thought I saw you." Weird coincidence. Small world, I guess. But she didn't believe in coincidences anymore. I could see it in her eyes, the first seeds of real fear. The fourth phase was the most satisfying. I'd been cultivating a relationship with Mrs. Cranston, our neighborhood's unofficial intelligence chief. A few casual conversations, some strategic complaints about feeling neglected, and she was ready to share everything she'd observed. "You know, dear," she said one afternoon while I was checking the mail, "I've been meaning to mention something. I've seen that Blake fellow coming and going from your house at odd hours, usually when your car isn't in the driveway." "Really? Judy mentioned he was helping with some work project." "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing inappropriate. But you know how people talk. The Hendersons were asking questions, and Sarah Peterson, well, she's got quite the imagination. Mrs. Cranston was doing exactly what I'd hoped, spreading doubt and speculation through the neighborhood gossip network. By the end of the week, everyone on our street would be watching my house, counting Blake's visits, timing his arrivals and departures. The pressure was building. Blake's confidence was cracking. Judy's paranoia was growing, and I was just getting started. Because they'd made one critical mistake when they decided to betray me. They'd forgotten that I was very good at hunting people who didn't want to be found, and now they were the prey. 2 weeks into my campaign, cracks were showing in enemy morale. Blake had traded his convertible for a boring sedan and started varying his routes to work. Judy was checking over her shoulder constantly, jumping at shadows that might or might not be there. But they were still together, still playing their game, still treating my daughter like an inconvenience and my marriage like a joke. Time to increase the pressure. I was at my office at Midwest Financial, reviewing security protocols for our downtown branch, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife's car is at the Riverside Motel, room 237, thought you should know. The Riverside Motel was the kind of place where people went when they needed to be invisible. Hourly rates, no questions asked, and a parking lot that couldn't be seen from the street. It was also 15 minutes from my office. I found Judy's silver Lexus parked behind the building, next to Blake's new sedan. Room 237 was on the second floor, with thin walls and cheaper locks than the ones I'd learned to pick in ranger training. But I didn't need to break in. I just needed to be seen trying. I climbed the exterior stairs slowly, making sure to trigger the motion sensor lights. At room 237, I knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed in the afternoon silence. Housekeeping, I called out in a terrible falsetto. The sounds from inside stopped immediately. Whispered conversation, hurried movement, the rustle of clothes being hastily assembled. I knocked again. Housekeeping. Need to check the air conditioning. Come back later, Blake's voice called out, trying to sound authoritative but landing somewhere around panicked. Sorry, sir. Manager says it's urgent. Won't take but a minute. More whispered conversation. I could picture them in there, half-dressed, terrified, trying to figure out if this was coincidence or something worse. I waited exactly 60 seconds, then walked away. But I made sure to stop at the vending machine at the end of the walkway, in full view of their window. Made sure they could see me buying a Coke and checking my phone like I had all the time in the world. The psychological effect was immediate. Within 10 minutes, both cars were gone, fleeing the scene like criminals escaping a crime. That evening, Judy came home 3 hours early, claiming she'd felt sick and left work. She was pale, jumpy, and kept checking her phone obsessively. Feeling better? I asked, playing the concerned husband. It's just a headache. Probably stress. Work still crazy? You could say that. She looked at me carefully. Andy, have you been... you haven't been checking up on me, have you? Checking up on you how? Following me. Having me followed. Anything like that. I gave her my best confused husband expression. Why would I do that? Should I be worried about something? She studied my face for a long moment, then shook her head. No, I'm just being paranoid. This whole Morrison account has me on edge. But paranoia was exactly what I wanted. Paranoia made people make mistakes, and when people made mistakes, they revealed weaknesses. The next phase required help, so I called in a favor from my old Army buddy Marcus Thompson, who now worked private security in Chicago. Marcus owed me for a situation in Fallujah that we'd agreed never to discuss in detail. I need surveillance equipment, I told him. Nothing illegal, just standard commercial stuff. How standard are we talking? GPS trackers, audio recording devices, basic photography equipment, the kind of thing any suspicious spouse could buy online. Jesus, Jonesy, your marriage really that bad? Worse, but I'm fixing it. The equipment arrived 2 days later in unmarked packaging. I spent the weekend learning how to use it properly. Not that I needed much training. The military had taught me surveillance techniques that made this consumer-grade stuff look like toys. Monday morning, I planted a GPS tracker on Blake's sedan while he was in his morning yoga class. The man was predictable as clockwork. Same routine every day, same parking spot, same overpriced coffee afterward. The tracker revealed interesting patterns. Blake wasn't just meeting Judy for their usual rendezvous. He was also visiting other locations, restaurants, bars, and most interestingly, the apartment of Ashley Morrison, Judy's best friend and co-worker. Ashley Morrison, 32 years old, recently divorced, and the kind of friend who smiled to your face while sharpening knives behind your back. I'd never liked her, but Judy insisted she was supportive and understanding. Apparently, she was understanding Blake quite well. This was an unexpected development. Was Blake playing multiple women? Or was something else going on? I needed more intelligence. The audio recording device went into Judy's car the next day, hidden inside the spare tire well where she'd never think to look. The conversations I captured over the following week painted a picture that was even uglier than simple adultery. "He's getting suspicious," Judy's voice, tinny through the small speaker. "You're being paranoid," Ashley replied. "Andy's not smart enough to figure this out." "You didn't see him at the motel. I swear he was watching us." "So what if he was? We're almost ready to move anyway." "I know, but I'm scared. You don't know him like I do. When he gets angry..." "When he gets angry, what? He'll cry into his beer and fix another motorcycle? The man's a broken-down soldier, not a threat." A broken-down soldier. That's what they thought of me. "Besides," Ashley continued, "once the divorce goes through, you'll have half of everything plus alimony. Blake's already promised to leave his wife once you're free. It's all working out perfectly." "What about Renee?" "Kids adjust, and honestly, she'll probably be better off with Andy anyway. You were never the maternal type." The maternal type. Like motherhood was a fashion choice instead of a responsibility. But the most revealing conversation came 3 days later, when it was just Ashley and Blake in the car. "She's getting cold feet," Blake's voice. "Judy's always been weak. That's why this has taken so long. Maybe we should have stuck with the original plan. Just wait for her to divorce him naturally." "The original plan would have taken years. This way, we control the timeline. We make him look unstable, maybe even dangerous. Courts love that narrative. Violent ex-soldier terrorizes innocent wife and child." "You really think he'll snap?" "Men like Andy always snap eventually, and when he does, we'll be there to document it. Judy gets everything, you get Judy, and I get the promotion when she's too grateful to compete with me." The original plan. Ashley hadn't just enabled the affair, she'd orchestrated it. This wasn't about love or passion or even simple betrayal. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my life for Ashley's professional advancement. I sat in my garage that night, listening to the recording again, and felt something shift inside me. The careful, methodical approach I'd been taking suddenly seemed inadequate. These people weren't just cheating. They were planning to frame me as an abuser, take my daughter, steal my assets, and ruin my reputation. They wanted to see me snap? Fine. But they'd forgotten something important about broken-down soldiers. We don't break the same way civilians do. When we snap, we don't lose control. We just stop following the rules. Frank found me at the gym the next morning, hitting the heavy bag like it owed me money. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" "Like you've made a decision." "Maybe I have. Want to talk about it?" I stopped hitting the bag and looked at him. Frank had been with me in some dark places, had seen me make hard choices when there were no good options available. "They're not just cheating, Frank. They're planning to destroy me, make me look like an abuser, take Renee, clean me out financially. The whole thing's been a setup from the beginning." Frank's expression went cold. "You sure about that?" I played him the recordings. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Those are some seriously twisted people, brother." "Yeah, they are." "So what's the plan?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they want. I'm going to snap." "Jonesy." "Not the way they expect. Not the way that gets me arrested or makes me look like the bad guy. But they want to see the soldier? They're going to see the soldier." Frank studied my face. "You need backup?" "Maybe. You still keep in touch with any of the old crew?" "A few. Tommy Rodriguez is doing private security in Detroit. Sarah Chen runs a tech company in Denver." "Why?" "Because this isn't just about my marriage anymore. This is about people who think they can destroy families for their own entertainment. And that's not something I can let slide." Frank nodded slowly. "When do we start?" "We've already started. They just don't know it yet." Because Ashley Morrison had made one critical error in her planning. She'd assumed I was just another suburban husband who'd roll over when threatened. She was about to learn why that assumption was a mistake. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening in October, when the leaves were dying and the air carried the promise of winter. I'd been planning it for weeks, orchestrating every detail like a military operation. The location was Flanagan's Bar, a working-class dive where Frank and I used to drink after particularly brutal training sessions. It was the kind of place where everyone minded their own business unless you gave them a reason not to. I'd arranged for Blake and Ashley to be there through a series of carefully planted suggestions, a fake emergency at work that required Ashley's immediate attention, a mysterious text to Blake claiming Judy was in trouble and needed help, the kind of urgent summons that bypassed rational thought and triggered protective instincts. By the time they realized it was a setup, I was already waiting for them in a corner booth with a clear view of all exits. Blake arrived first, looking around nervously for Judy. He'd dressed down for the occasion, jeans and a polo shirt instead of his usual designer armor, but he still looked like a tourist in a foreign country. Ashley showed up 10 minutes later, her expression shifting from concern to confusion to anger as she spotted me sitting alone. "Where's Judy?" Blake demanded, sliding into the booth across from me. "Safe at home with our daughter," I said, "where she should have been all along." Ashley remained standing, her hand on her purse like she was ready to run. "What is this, Andy? Some kind of intervention?" "You could call it that. I prefer to think of it as a performance review." I gestured to the empty seat beside Blake. "Sit down, Ashley. We have things to discuss." "I don't think so. This feels like harassment." "Harassment?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Lady, you haven't seen harassment yet. But if you walk out of here now, you're going to find out what it looks like." She sat down. "Good. Now, let's talk about your little project. The one where you manipulate my wife into an affair, plan to frame me as an abuser, and steal my family for your own advancement." Blake's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings. Ashley's voice filled the air between us. "Men like Andy always snap eventually, and when he does, we'll be there to document it." The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, the bar continued its normal rhythm, conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses, but our little corner had gone completely silent. "You've been recording us," Ashley said finally. "Among other things, amazing what you can learn when people think they're invisible. That's illegal." "Actually, it's not. Single-party consent state, and these were conversations in public spaces or vehicles. I checked with a lawyer." Blake found his voice. "Look, man, this has gotten out of hand. Maybe we can work something out." "Work something out?" I leaned forward. "You mean like the way you worked out treating my daughter like garbage? Or the way you worked out stealing my wife? That kind of working out?" "Judy came to me," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "She was unhappy. I didn't pursue her." "Bullshit." I played another recording, this one of Ashley coaching Blake on how to seduce Judy, how to exploit her insecurities, her ambitions, her frustrations with our marriage. "You orchestrated the whole thing," I continued. "Ashley wanted Judy out of the way for a promotion, and you wanted a new toy to play with. My family was just collateral damage." Ashley had recovered some of her composure. "Even if that were true, what are you going to do about it? Beat us up? That would just prove you're the unstable ex-soldier we said you were." "Who said anything about violence?" I smiled, and both of them flinched. "I'm not going to lay a finger on either of you. I don't need to." I pulled out a tablet and showed them the screen. It was a website, professionally designed, well-organized, and devastating in its thoroughness. "Welcome to The Truth About Ashley Morrison and Blake Harmon," I said. "Complete with photos, audio recordings, text messages, financial records, and character references from people you've both screwed over in the past." Blake stared at the screen in horror. "You can't publish this." "I already have. It went live an hour ago. I've also sent copies to your employers, your families, your friends, and several local journalists who specialize in exposing corporate corruption. Ashley's hands were shaking. This will destroy our careers. That's the idea. You wanted to destroy my family for your careers. Seems like a fair trade. We'll sue you for defamation. With what money? Your legal bills are going to be astronomical, and something tells me your employers aren't going to be very supportive once this gets out. I stood up, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their conspiracy. Oh, and one more thing, I said. Stay away from my family. If I see either of you within 100 yards of my wife or daughter, the website is going to be the least of your problems. Blake started to stand, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. You think you're some kind of tough guy? You're nothing but a washed-up soldier playing dress-up. That was his mistake. I moved faster than he could process, grabbing his wrist and applying pressure to a nerve cluster I'd learned in close-quarters combat training. He dropped back into his seat with a gasp of pain. You're right, I said quietly. I am a washed-up soldier, but I'm a washed-up soldier who spent 15 years learning how to hurt people in ways that don't leave marks. So I'd suggest you sit there quietly while I finish talking. I released his wrist, and he cradled it against his chest, his face pale with shock. As I was saying, stay away from my family, because if you don't, I'm going to make your lives so miserable that you'll beg me to just beat you up instead. I walked out of the bar, leaving them to contemplate their new reality. Behind me, I could hear Ashley crying and Blake cursing under his breath, but I wasn't done yet. The final phase of my plan required one more confrontation, this one with my wife. I found Judy at home, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. She'd obviously been in contact with her co-conspirators because she turned on me the moment I walked through the door. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "My career is ruined. Ashley's been fired. Blake's wife is filing for divorce." "Good," I said calmly. "Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to have your life destroyed by people you trusted. I never meant for it to go this far. Bullshit. You were planning to take Renee, clean me out financially, and paint me as an abuser. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was just a simple affair." She collapsed into a chair, all the fight going out of her. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. You have the right to find a lawyer and explain to them why you conspired to frame your husband as a domestic abuser. Good luck with that." "What about Renee?" "What about her? You were ready to use her as a weapon against me. Now you're worried about her welfare?" Judy looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I know I screwed up, but she's still my daughter." "Then you should have thought about that before you let your boyfriend treat her like garbage. Before you laughed while he locked her out in the rain. Before you decided your ambition was more important than her stability. I can change. We can work this out." "No, we can't, because I don't know who you are anymore. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. The mother I thought you were wouldn't have sacrificed her child for a promotion and a new boyfriend." She sat there crying while I went upstairs to check on Renee. I found her in her room, doing homework with headphones on. She looked up when I knocked. "Is Mom leaving?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart, she is." Good. I was tired of pretending everything was okay. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. "Are you going to be okay?" I asked. "Are you?" "I think so. It might take some time, but I think we're going to be fine." She nodded and went back to her homework. Resilient, just like her mother had said. But not in the way Judy had meant. When I came back downstairs, Judy was gone. She'd taken a suitcase and left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I picked up the ring and looked at it for a long moment. 14 years of marriage reduced to a small circle of gold and a pile of broken promises. Then I dropped it in the trash and opened a beer. Outside, Mrs. Cranston was at her window, watching our house like always. But for once I didn't mind the audience. Let her watch. Let the whole neighborhood see that Andy Jones wasn't the broken-down soldier they'd thought he was. I was something much more dangerous. A man who'd learned to fight back. And I'd won.